now that we have finished reading Inside Out and Back Again and reading all of our informational texts, we are going to write what is called a literary analysis. All right, so the prompt for our literary analysis is this. Consider the meaning of the novel's title, Inside Out and Back Again. How does this title relate to the universal refugee experience of fleeing and finding home? And in what ways is Ha's life an example of this universal experience? So you're going to need to think about those characteristics that we've talked about for that refugees experience when they're fleeing home, when they're finding home, when their lives are being turned inside out, and when their lives are being turned back again. So you're going to focus on Ha and how her life specifically is an example of this universal experience. Okay, so when you are writing an analysis, you are not summarizing. I've read the book, you have read the book, so you really want to focus on an analysis rather than summarizing the text. I don't want to know what happens in the book. That's not what this is about. Okay, so a literary analysis is this. It is essentially an argument about the novel that expresses your personal perspective, interpretation, judgment, or critical evaluation of the works. So those words are super important. It is your personal perspective, the way you interpret what has been written, a judgment that you can make, or your critical evaluation of the text. So, for example, why do you think the author used specific ideas, specific word choices, or writing structures to convey his or her message to the reader? So it's really like tearing apart the text. It's not telling me what happened, but instead it's telling why things happen or how something stands for something else. So it includes 4 paragraphs, okay? The first paragraph is your introductory paragraph, and it in itself has 3 parts. And you'll notice on the left-hand side as I go through the presentation that I have numbered each slide to let you know which slide is which paragraph, okay? So the introduction is all paragraph 1. So in this introduction, you're going to have the hook, the context, and the thesis. So it has 3 parts, the hook, the context, and the thesis. So first now I'm going to talk about the hook. The hook is a way to get your reader right away motivated to read the text that you have written, okay? And it must be related to your thesis. So that is important, and that is something that you need to keep in mind throughout writing this entire essay, is that every sentence you write must be tied to the thesis. You have to keep that in mind throughout the text. Okay, so for a hook, there are 3 things that you can do. You can ask a question that is related to the thesis. You can make a powerful statement concerning your thesis, or you can use a quote to interest the reader that focuses on your thesis. But again, everything comes back to that thesis statement. Following the hook, you have the context. And the context is basically kind of setting the scene. It's giving some background about your thesis. It's going to orient the reader to the novel, events. It can also orient them to the universal refugee experience at large. Okay, but it's just giving a little bit of background. It's not a summary of the book. It just gives a little bit of background so the reader can move into what your thesis is very easily. Okay, you're providing a context again without giving a complete summary of the book, and again, it has to relate to your thesis. So keep that in mind again. Everything must keep coming back to your thesis statement. All right, now the thesis, and we're actually going to spend a bit of time this week on writing our thesis in class. Okay, but this is to give you an idea of what your thesis is. It's essentially your claim. It's what you're going to argue in the essay. It is the entire point of your literary analysis. And from here on out, the word thesis and claim, consider them to be the same thing. All right, your thesis has 3 parts, okay? The first part is the topic. The second is your position on the topic. And third is your rationale. So it's the topic, it's how you feel about the topic, and it's why you feel. So what it is, how you feel about it, and why you feel that way. It should be only 1 sentence. I've seen so far in your writing that some of you want to create a claim that is like 3 sentences long. The claim should only be 1 sentence, and it has to include these 3 parts. okay? It also is going to be the last sentence of that introductory paragraph. So I'm going to be looking to see, do you have a hook? Okay. What is your context? Okay. And now your thesis should be the very last thing that I read in your introductory paragraph. It should be around 25 words, and it should be clear, concise, and powerful. Okay. It should be abundantly clear to me exactly what your essay is going to focus on. And lastly, never, ever, ever do I want to see the words I think or I believe. Just eliminate those personal pronouns from your vocabulary when you are writing anything that is formal writing, like a literary analysis. Okay, so that second paragraph. So we finished the introduction. Now we're on that second paragraph. This second paragraph is going to focus on how a refugee's life turns inside out when forced to leave his country, and include text evidence from an informational text and inside out and back again. So you're going to be pulling quotes from one of the informational texts that we read, as well as inside out and back again, to focus on one characteristic of a refugee's life that is universal when they turn inside out. Okay? So now this paragraph is going to start with a transitional sentence. It is a transitional topic sentence that introduces how specifically Ha's life is turned inside out. Okay? What is that universal characteristic that's shared among all refugees whose lives are turned inside out? Then you're going to pull that information from the text. Okay? You're going to pull a direct quote from an informational text demonstrating that characteristic, include an analysis of how that evidence supports your universal characteristic, and then you're going to pull a quote from inside out and back again that demonstrates that same characteristic and provide an analysis of, again, how that evidence proves the Ha's life has been turned inside out. So, for example, if the characteristic that you choose is that every refugee is forced to leave behind everything they've ever known, you're going to pull quotes from an informational text that has that information, as well as a piece from inside out and back again that shows how they must leave behind everything they've ever known and loved. Okay, so again, you're focusing on one characteristic that is universal to every refugee who turns inside out when they're fleeing home, with text evidence and an analysis showing how that piece of text proves your point. Okay, paragraph 3 of the body is the back again part. So here you're going to focus on when the refugee finds home, okay, how their life turns back again after finding home. And just like you did in paragraph 2, you're going to be pulling text evidence. So say, for example, you say that when they find home, they learn the language and they're able to adapt to their new culture, okay? So you're going to, again, want to start with that transitional sentence, okay, telling how Ha's life has been turned back again and that universal characteristic, pulling your text evidence, your direct quotes from one of the informational texts we've read, as well as from inside out and back again. So in those text evidences, you really want to make sure that you're showing how it demonstrates the characteristic through your analysis. Be very specific in your analysis. All right, the conclusion paragraph is your last paragraph. Paragraph number 4. Okay, so in your conclusion, this is where you're wrapping up your essay. You're reaffirming everything that you've asserted about Ha and how Ha's life represents the universal refugee experience. You want to be sure that you start with a transitional word or phrase to make it clear that we have moved to the transition, or excuse me, to the conclusion. So as a result of Ha's life turning inside out and back again, blah, blah, blah. Okay, you want to, just really make some kind of final push to make your claim very evident to the reader. You're going to restate your thesis, but in different words, restate the evidence that you used, and leave a lasting impression on the reader. Okay, lastly, some other things to remember. You must use MLA format. You must have in-text citations, which I'm going to talk about another time. You also will need a works cited page, and do not use those personal pronouns. And then lastly, the evaluation. I'm going to be looking at your introduction, the evidence, the commentary you used, your conclusion, and your grammar.